Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Light 360. I'm so excited to come to you again today from Chicagoland, broadcasting. We have been having such an awesome time in season 3. Powerful stories from the various guests that have been coming on. And yesterday, we had such a great time with our guest yesterday. It was very, very inspiring. Really thanking God for openness and just all the various things that she shared, and also thanking the audience, all of you, for your engagement. I always appreciate your joining in the conversation. It was a beautiful time. So today we're going to be going into another wonderful time. I believe we have such a rich somebody with such a rich experience that is going to be joining us today. And I believe that our story will be inspiring to you. So once again, this is Light 360. And Light 360 is set up very simply to inspire people as they strive to be light for Christ in their spheres of influence through the use of stories. We believe that stories are powerful. The Lord Jesus Christ used stories. We call them parables. The Bible is full of stories. I'm sure right now, if you think of, certain things that have inspired you, you think of David and Goliath, you think of, the stories of Paul, even the stories of Jesus, stories of Moses. So we believe that, even in our days, stories can inspire us. I'm talking about contemporary stories of people who are living their lives to honor God and to fulfill God's purpose, on the earth. So we are so excited today to have another guest that will be sharing our story, and I believe you will be inspired. So we appreciate you for joining us. I want to ask you, we are broadcasting right now simultaneously on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. My personal Facebook page, and also on the Life Development Center Facebook page. So I want to ask you to please share this video as you are joining. I see people joining. Share this video on your page so that we can reach more people. You do not know, who something from this interview, is going to touch or inspire. Also, would like to ask you, if you are joining us for the very first time, we are able to monitor comments coming in from the various social media platforms, and we will display, some of them that are very relevant to our conversation. And then somewhere towards the end of our conversation today, you will have the opportunity to to ask our guest some questions live, and she'll be able to address those questions and answer them. So thank you for joining us. So without wasting any more time, the official introduction over, I'd like to just quickly introduce our guest today. I'd like to read our official bio, and then I'll do something unofficial, and then I'll bring her on. So we have on today Dr. Felecia Thompson. You can see a picture right there. Dr. Felecia Thompson is a native of the South Side of Chicago, South Side. We had a West Side person yesterday, and a mother of 2 grown daughters. She's been married for over 43 years. That is something to talk about today. To Stephen, Felicia received a Bachelor of Arts and Science from DePaul University, a Master of Science from Spadus College, and received a Doctor of Ministry degree from Berkeley Graduate University in Seattle. Felicia has also gone through senior management training with Service Master Corporation and John Templeton Institute program for nonprofit board leadership and fundraising. Dr. Thompson's teaching gifts have given her instructional roles at Moody Bible Institute, Trinity Christian College, Northern Seminary, as well as numerous conferences. Her administrative and leadership gifts have been utilized with the Divorce Family Foundation and Urban Leadership Initiative, Trinity Christian College, the Family Care Network, and board service for the Fame Center and Together Chicago. Bright Promise Front, Chicagoland United in Prayer. Our most recent launch was Resilient, a community development project begun via the effort of Christ Church of Oak Brook. She has directed community partnership programs for Trinity Christian College as associate to the president at World Vision, where she served as executive director of its Chicagoland operation and as domestic mission director for Christ Church of Oak Brook. She has now retired from full-time work, but serves as an adjunct professor at Northern Seminary and is a facilitator of Micah Intensive for Fuller Theological Seminary. Wow. That is such a rich experience. And we want to mine the gold, want to mine the diamond today. Unofficially, got to meet Dr. Thompson through the prayer collaborative and also community development collaborative that is ongoing in Chicago right now. Together Chicagoland United in Prayers, many times with Dr. Fielder, who was my teacher at Moody and who has been on this show also, earlier this year. We will convene and, I see her talking and, just, sharing and been observing her. And, so just so excited that today, despite her busy schedule, she's able to join us today. She's one of those people that God is using in the city of Chicago, to just, work, get the body of Christ collaborating and working together, especially to deal with all the issues going on in our city right now. And she has worked and invested in this city for many, many years, as you all can see from her bio. So we just want to glean some wisdom from her, learn from her life, and I believe that you will be inspired. So with that said, I would like us to welcome to Light 360 right now, Dr. Felecia Thompson. Welcome, Dr. Felecia.
Hi, Dr. Lon. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you. Like, as I said in the intro, we really, really appreciate your time. We know you're a very busy person. We're very grateful that you are giving us this time and, just to share with our audience and share with us about your life. We appreciate it. I would thank you for all the work you have done in the city. And we thank you. Yes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for being a partner in that too.
All right. Awesome. So I'm going to ask you the very first question I ask everyone that comes on the show. And that's, how did it all begin? What, tell us a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, your background.
Well, I was actually, if you can believe this, born in a rural area of the Midwest in the United States called Iowa. And a lot of times you don't hear very many people of color coming from that place, but my family had been actually African-American cowboys and came through Wyoming to Nebraska to Missouri and then to Iowa.
Wow, that's the first time I'm hearing about African-American cowboys.
Yes, they herded cattle and served in that way rather than there was some in the slavery situation, but others of them did that as well. So I came from a hardworking family. And then my mom, who was a single mom, moved to Chicago when I was young, a toddler, and just began to just expose me to what it would look like for my life to be different from hers. So I have to say, she raised me in the church. I think one of the first things she did was have me christened in the church. And, I served in the little Sunday school classes and sang in little choirs and really came to love the church. I think that I got approval. I got a reinforcement. I was encouraged by the body of Christ to learn. And I think I have someone told me I have a insatiable appetite to learn. And that's what I think the Lord has used over the years, basically through studying scripture, first of all. And then later on, going to school and integrating some of the schools in Chicago. We moved to a community called Inglewood, probably back in Woodlawn in the 1950s, and then to Inglewood, which was not totally African-American as it is now. It was a compilation of German, Dutch, Irish, Asian, South Asian, and African Americans moving in. And so I got a chance to integrate many of the schools that were in that community. It was not always pleasant, but because I didn't know any better, I didn't think I was any different from them. And I think I had a mother that probably visited the principal a few times and threatened him, I think, to make sure that her child got what everybody else did. So I'm so grateful to my mom, who went to home to be with the Lord, for her persistence in that. And I had landlords that bring me books back from Germany and just encouraged me to read and encouraged me in certain ways. So went to high school here. I went to Jones, which is now Jones Prep, and then had no intentions of going to college. I just figured I had a great job in the mayor's office back in the early 1970s, in 1970 for Mayor Daley, and I would just stay there until I went home because it was such a great job. But a friend of mine, about 2 or 3 weeks before graduation, said, "You really need to go to college." And I was like, I'm doing great. I'm gonna, work and be fine and move. And she said, "You really are have something, and I think you need to pursue this." And because of her, I applied to DePaul and got accepted. Had no clue. Kept my job. Worked full time. Went to school full time for 5 years until I graduated.
Wow.
And then met my husband and finished school. And I was a stay-at-home mom actually for about 8 to 10 years. I felt it important because of what I got to be at home with my kids. But while doing that, I never stopped learning. I started to write for Christian magazines. I wrote articles for Christian Moms magazines. Began to get involved with Child Evangelism Fellowship because of my children. Served at the local school. And there I learned, because of my positions working in the mayor's office in Chicago and with the Chicago Board of Education, I already had a keen eye for politics. I began to ask the Lord, what is this thing? And then I began to look at how the Lord structured the Old Testament and the people what he did in the Old Testament times. If you think politics aren't in the Bible, just read some of the Old Testament stories. And so we are geared to be people to make change, and we are geared to be people that notice systems that need to be fixed and tweaked to our knowledge. And so I did that. And then after a while, my kids were old enough, went back to work at Trinity Christian College, where I was encouraged by the faculty to be faculty, finished a master's degree, and on and on and on. While doing all that, though, while I was a wife and mother and a wife of a jail chaplain, my husband worked for 25 years as a chaplain for Cook County Jail and Prison, and then went into aftercare, where we saw many men who were in jail that some didn't deserve to be there and others who needed a new start. So I began something called Family Care Network. And that Family Care Network was out of our church. It was a not-for-profit, my first hand at starting a not-for-profit. I filed all the papers, hired one staff person, which was me, and then got volunteers to begin to work with the single moms in our neighborhood, because by then we had moved out, moved back. Things were not the same. The economic status for most people, poor African Americans and some non-African American folks, was not good. They weren't graduating high school. Single moms were very, very young. And I felt just like my mom was a single mom. That didn't mean they couldn't be good parents. So we began to teach parenting skills. We had a parenting class, and we began then to distribute food, and we began to do clothing. We began to do GED programs, so much so that the state of Illinois started sending me young women to the church. And the only criteria was that I told them, you have to participate in some kind of Bible study. So we would do a 30-minute Bible study before all our programming, and they came faithfully and brought their babies with them. And then we had to do babysitting, and then we had to get the older women involved at our church, and we did exercise to get them in shape. And so this was all just looking at how my life was blessed and why can't everybody have this? I know how to do it, and I've been the recipient of it. I definitely can return that to the community. So that's how that community involvement happened. We got involved with the police, the local medical centers, had to figure out how to get kids vaccinated. And eventually they came to me and said, we don't care that you're teaching the gospel, that you're praying, that you're doing. We just see lives being changed.
Mm.
And so that ran from 1992 to 2005.
Yeah.
And, that's how the Lord has used me since that time to teach it in college, to help other organizations and churches start not-for-profits. My master's degree is in not-for-profit management. I train boards and those things. But that's how I got into this, was because I was on the receiving end.
Okay.
And God used the graciousness of his people to bring me to a place. And we were always taught, at least back in my day, that you don't just get educated for yourself, you do that for your community.
Yes. Well.
And so we determined that we would stay in the inner city of Chicago, make our home there, not leave our neighborhoods, so that we could have kids be latchkey kids at my house. Sometimes everybody came to the Thompson's house to hang out, and they knew it was safe, and we kept the girls and boys away from each other and did hot chocolate and popcorn. So the ministry goes from the heights of education to simple things like popcorn and hot chocolate.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to go back a little bit. So you talked about living in Inglewood when you were young, when it was still, there were still some Europeans and all that. So, well, many of us now that we're in Chicago, we know the way it is right now. We have some ideas, from reading books and all that, how it used to be, then. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the way things were. I know the South was more, people were moving from the South here, the migration and all that. But coming to Chicago, and you still had to go through all that, that you went through. You talked about, your mom having to go to the principal and all that. Could you just describe how Chicago was, especially the South side of Chicago was then?
So if you read anything about U.S. history and after slavery and Reconstruction, there was something called the Great Migrations. There were two of them, one in the 1920s and one in the 1940s. And once those doors were opened, people felt that they could escape the Jim Crow South, only to find that there was the same Jim Crow happening in the cities. And so, but they did come and where they could find jobs. So those jobs meant upward mobility. So factories, many steel mills, plants that would hire skilled and some unskilled workers. And folks had a way to set themselves down and make a living. If you've ever seen the movie with Sidney Poitier, I can't even think of the name of it, but A Raisin in the Sun.
Okay, Raisin in the Sun, set in Washington Park, yes.
Yeah, and here in Chicago. So typically that was what it was like. My stepdad came from Alabama. My mother was from Tennessee. My biological father, was from Iowa. And so he was a musician. So he would come here and find jobs, play for places like the Regal Theater and the Trianon Ballroom, and White and Black. And in Inglewood at the time, it was just before what was called redlining and what they called white flight. And what happened was, as African Americans, we filled the east side. So Washington Park to the Lake Michigan in Chicago, all along that area. And then the near west side was all occupied by ethnic peoples. So you could find a patch of Irish folks here. Chicago's still that way, still very segregated. But there was something in that segregation that gave strength. And I'll tell you what that means. I wouldn't ever want us to be segregated again. But growing up around my own folks, and you guys probably know this because you're raised in another country, give you a sense of solidity and empowerment of who you are. In a way,
identity that is very strong.
Very strong. And so, and once you can imbue that to a child, it's hard to beat. Well, it's easy to beat it out of them, but it's harder when the parents have really backed them up. So when we moved to Inglewood, every time the color lines would change, every time whites would flee, we would move further west, because my father felt that my stepfather felt that he wanted us to have a better education, and that we would get it. Because if schools were segregated, then maybe kids were getting something that we didn't. And that wasn't necessarily true, but in some cases it was. So we moved from the lake. We kept going west and west and west till we finally settled in Inglewood. And within Inglewood, we moved 3 or 4 times until we could afford to buy a home.
Okay.
And so my kindergarten was at Wentworth School, and my teachers had not had Black children in their class. So it was myself, and I still know my partner was Faye Reeves, and
Wow.
kindergartners in that class. And there were subliminal things that got done to us that I think I was just such a happy kid that I didn't really know that it was probably wrong until I came home and talked to my mom. Not being able to go to the bathroom when everybody else did.
Wow.
A little delay on getting milk when my mother had paid for milk. There wasn't one for me, and cookies. And so I just go home and tell her, I think they forgot me at class today. And my mother was like, they didn't forget you. She showed up the next day. And one day I saw the teacher after she finished talking to her in the corner, crying a little bit. And I said, I learned from my mom to confront evil.
Yeah.
And to do it biblically, and to do it in love, but to do it. And so I watched her do that for me and for my siblings. And I think we're the better for it as we advocate on behalf of other people now. So Inglewood changed. By the time 1960s came, when I was graduating from high school, it was predominantly a fully Black neighborhood with some African and Caribbean families moving in as well.
Okay. Well, so will you say it's better now? Like things are better now than then? Yeah.
Well, what I meant was that, not in that neighborhood, of course, but what I meant by that was the communities at that time for us integrating them were pretty tough. Just being seen as whole people, just being not even trying to prove, just trying to be treated fairly in the classrooms. Now, I can't say that that's when you look at Chicago's educational system, it is very much in need of folks that are going on. But the crisis for us at that time was that we were Black children in a white setting. Now, I think our Black children suffer because the education system does not push them and push them to strive for more. I think it gives them a very limited education. So that's what I meant by that, just so you know. Racism is still there. The equality is still there. It just takes a different form. So
were you? I'm sure you were there when the projects were being constructed, built, and all that.
Yes, we were. There was no Dan Ryan Expressway when I was a kid, and so my husband actually grew up in the project. So he played in what is now the Dan Ryan Expressway.
Wow.
So, and when those came up, in actuality, the folks that migrated from the South. There's a movie that you can see on Urban Renewal at the Museum of Science and Industry and other museums that I believe maybe Ebony Magazine had a hand in, or University of Chicago, where you saw elders from the South with their canes in hand saying to the Black community, do not move into those buildings.
Wow, I've never heard that. Wow.
Yes, it's on film, in black and white film. Stay where you are. Work hard to purchase the property. Keep your families together. Once you move into those housing projects, you'll never get out.
Yeah.
That was 1960, 61. And you see, you hear about them all over the world at Cabrini Green.
Yeah, we used to watch Good Times in Africa then. The comedy, was Cabrini Green. Yeah.
And in actuality, we hear about Cabrini Green, but the Robert Taylor homes are the largest single-site housing in America under one place. And so that's where my husband grew up. So, you saw that. And so my parents refused. We had friends who moved in, and the rent was cheap. The heat was great. The community was fine. But my father said, I do not want to be another slave or another indentured servant to the system.
Yeah.
And so he worked until he could find us a house to live in. And that's what we did.
I understand that the projects were built to in order to prevent spread. Like they wanted just African Americans to just be in one place, not spread all around.
Yeah, and what they did was promise housing, that they would build housing, regular houses, and move them out.
Okay.
And it became the trap. And but that doesn't mean that when I first met my husband, and I started to go there and see, and we had family friends that lived there. There's a sense of community within there too. I mean, if you talk to people that grew up in the housing projects, there was a time when they'll tell you they weren't like that. It was a great place to live. People respected one another. The grandmothers were all, the generations were all in a house together. And so whenever you have that, you have enough eyes on the children and enough hands in the pot to really create. So it wasn't until like the late 70s, 80s, and 90s that you started to hear that this was a dangerous place to be.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot with this, but what do you think, from your perspective, was responsible for that decline? There was a very strong family value from what I've read. And then, suddenly something's changed.
All right.
What was responsible?
Yeah, well, there were also all kinds of reports that came out on African Americans, a single mother, which the Kerner report, and there was another big one that I think Life magazine did. It took 4 or 5 years. And I found that as I've studied sociologically, that if you had done the same studies with white mothers and white families, they were breaking up at the same rate. They were having children out of wedlock at the same rate. I know that many times at Trinity, when I would begin to teach the first sociology class, I talk about there being more people from the European races who were on public aid in the food lines, as just as many as there were for us. And people would say, "You're not telling the truth." I said, well, if we're only 11% of the entire population of the United States, all that money is not going to
our capital.
Yeah. So I think the breakdown, sometimes those reports call us the permanent underclass, but those are all, to me, stigmatizations that sometimes the reality becomes that, the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell people what they are long enough, sometimes they believe it. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. So, so you don't believe there was really a decline? Is that?
Well, I believe there was a decline, but I think for the very same reasons that there are declines everywhere. The lack of turning away from faith in God, divorces being easier to get. The movements when I was in the 70s, college was free love, the sexual revolution, the feminine mystiques, all the things that happened to us as a culture, the openness of all our ways of living, and it changed who we were as a nation. And I think that always the people on the bottom of the barrel are the last to catch it and catch it the hardest. So I think that the changes have happened. The same drug infestations, you look at the opioid situation, is not mostly us. It's just
suburban.
Yeah. So crack was, somebody said, was even invented to be easy addictive for African Americans to keep us in prison. While the average person I know in the suburbs who's a wealthy woman might be taking more opioids than the average person. So I think that and I attribute this, of course, to the loss of a respect and honoring of God. First of all. And I think that's throughout our culture, if you really look at it that way. I think the one thing we could always count on as African-American people was that God brought us through.
Yes.
As we move further away from that, then we suffer the ills of any other community, So, and it's more noticeable because who gets reported on all the time.
Well, that's a very refreshing perspective, that you just shared on the whole thing. So I'm very interested in the history, been studying it, from school, living, on the South Side, talking to people, reading, doing all that. So I'm always very interested in hearing perspectives and views on things that happened before, because all you people, you and all the other people, are forerunners for us. So it's good to know what has happened before
I know I've been in Africa several times, and I don't feel like a foreigner when I go there. So I feel at home, actually.
Yeah, it's home. So yeah. So who were your early influences? Like people that really made an impact on your life. Growing mentors, people.
Yeah. There was a woman two women at my church that were first thing you noticed about them as a small child is how well dressed they were, and I realized later on that they were educators, one or two of them, but they just really had a sense of purpose that God had called them to, working, one in government and one as a teacher. And the teacher was influential when I was a kid. Uh, and the other lady was Barbara Rollins, was influential as I grew and started to work in city government. To help me understand the wiles of folks. I was a naive person, smart, but not smart worldly wise.
Not street smart, right?
Yeah. I had a little bit, but not enough to handle mayors and aldermen and all those other people. And she really worked with me to show me how to let the Lord shine through and be a dignified woman of grace and not fall prey to a lot of stuff, But then as I grew older, I became aware of people like Shirley Chisholm and different political women who were in politics. And I had some teachers that kind of took me under their wings. And then I had a boss at Moody Bible Institute. His name was Donald Cole.
I don't think I met him there when I was there.
Yeah, he might not have been there. He's a radio pastor, and I began to work for him. And he said to me, he looked me straight in the eye one day, he says, you are really you and you married really young. He said, but don't, is your husband okay with you growing? And I said, yes. He said, then I need you to read. And so part of my job was to look at current issues and prepare them for him to talk about them on radio, a program called Open Line. There's another man doing that now. And so anything controversial, like we know right now the George Floyd trial is happening.
Going on.
He would send me to research all Christian periodicals, Sojourners Magazine, Christianity Today, Time, Ebony News, whatever it was. And I said, who gets to get paid to read and to learn? And so
that's the kind of job I want now.
I know. I would set him up so that he would be able to talk about those things. And then biblically, he was such a scholar. But then at the end of the programs, he said, and if you want to know more, call my assistant, Felicia, tomorrow and I would not know he was doing this.
Wow.
So we need to be prepared to address some issues, some very touchy social issues, even amongst believers, by using the word of God. So he was a heavy influence on my life and just kept telling me, keep educating yourself till you can't go anymore, till you can't afford it. And then if you can't afford it, find somebody else to pay for it. So I was raising children, and every move they would make as they would get older, I would, do school with them. So we'd all be doing homework together at some point. And I fortunately had a very supportive husband who didn't mind if I shined a little bit,
Awesome.
while he shined as well. And so that's who influenced me.
Thank you for sharing that. So a lot of people in our audience, and just people generally, they struggle with the question of, why am I here on the earth? What am I supposed to devote my life to? You obviously, you are not at that stage any longer. You knew this is what I wanted to do. What was the process of discovery for you?
Well, I think I remember memorizing, and back in the days in my Sunday school life, we would memorize like whole chapters of scripture. And we'd do a Bible drill. We get together on Friday nights as teenager, and one church would try to outshine the other church and who could memorize. But those scriptures stuck with me, Dr. Lon. And one of the verses I heard was that he who has begun a good work in you is faithful to complete it until the day of Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. What does that mean? What does that mean? What good work has God begun in me? And I began to ask the Lord those questions. I began to go to Him. Lord, show me what you want me to do. I know I'm not just here. Um, Even though being a wife and mother is, I'm prouder of that than anything. To do only that you mean for me to build into the lives of other people the way other people believed in me. And so every time I get discouraged, and believe you me, I ran into some situations where through godly people with racism was prominent. There was this competitive edge, and I thought we were going to be kumbaya and we'd all work together to bring the kingdom. And then I realized that some of us had issues and had unmet and not been challenged about how we think about loving one another, what that really means. So that's what let me know that there was a special place that God had begun a good work in me. And if it was teaching, then it would do that. If it was being the best mom I could, it would do the best community servant I could be, it would do that. But I read about people who had done what I did and figured if they could do it with God's power, I could too.
Wow, awesome. And you obviously had certain passions. It looks like you had a passion towards education, teaching, and politics, from everything.
Social work.
Yeah, social work in general, which of course can lead you into politics and lead you into other stuff.
Yeah. Because you have to tackle all those systems that keep people, and you have to teach people who, when they do get the foot in the door, how to handle those systems. And I think a lot what happens to our kids is they run up against and for me it was a painful thing in the Christian life, because I thought Christians wouldn't be the way other people would be, and they are just as we only sinners saved by grace, right? And some of us have more grace extended to us than others, right? And so how do I still maneuver in Christian systems, because we do have them, we have structures, and begin to talk to people about changes that need to be made so that we all can begin to operate from a level playing field. And so when you study those things, and when you do, you realize my boldness doesn't come because I'm a bold person. It is because I know God sent me on behalf of other people. So who will for them? Here, my Lord, send me. I better be equipped to do that. I better be on my P's and Q's and know what I'm talking about. And I better be able to distinguish when there's a spiritual attack versus a human's pride involved in that, and be okay, because the leveling ground for me was the Word of God. If you profess to be a Christian, then I don't care how much education you have, I don't care where you live, how much money you have, and what you do. At the foot of the cross, we are equal.
Yes.
And so that means that everyone should have that right to pursue. And I don't even know if it's this whole American thing about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but how not just pursue life happily?
Pursue life happily.
Happily, right? And so to do that, you have to have a firm grip, because in those places I sat in political places, everybody knew I was saved. They called me the nun, none of this and none of that.
Wow.
They make bets. I bet you she's got that Bible in the top right drawer.
How did you deal with that? How did you deal with all that?
I think that just I really believed that Jesus could change a life, and so I knew what he'd done in my life, and because he'd done that, why couldn't he do it to everybody else? So it really didn't matter to me who approached me, because it was always a dare. Can we get her to slip up? Can we get her to do something she's not supposed to? But more importantly, at the end of the day, like everybody else, you have trials and tribulations in your life. So it wouldn't be beyond a alderman or someone to come in my office and say, my wife is sick, would you pray for me? Now my children are gone astray. I hear Steve goes to Cook County Jail. Could you get him to go visit my child? At the end of the day, we are flesh and we are blood, and we have trials and tribulations in our life. So it would be unlike people to see somebody praying, right next to my desk, or me going out to the stairwell and we pray together sitting on the steps or those things. So for me, I never separated ministry from my vocation.
Mm, mm.
They're one and the same.
They're one and the same.
And so whatever I do, I am to do it to the glory of God. And
Mhm.
as one of your guests, Doc, would say, to the honor of his great name. You
Mhm.
know, that
Yeah.
is what moved me and has still fuels me to
Mhm.
this day. So
Wow, that's so powerful. So 43 years of marriage.
mhm.
That's not a joke. So I am
It is a miracle, Dr. Lon.
I'm gonna be 20 next month, and I know what 20 means.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about 43 years.
Well, let me first start by saying the way you see me now, I was probably twice as exuberant when I got married. And I remember my dad telling my husband, he said, "Now," he says, "you got a whippersnapper there." He says, "She's a smart girl. I know what I raised. I know how I raised her." And he looked him dead in his eyes. He said, "But if ever you feel you can't handle her,
Mhm.
bring her back where you got her from, and don't hurt her."
Wow.
And so I think that it wasn't a threat necessarily, but
It was
it was
advice.
it was a fine tuning of the vows. You know, she's not. I know she's going to give you trouble. She's giving it to me. Why? Why are we doing that? What are you going to questions? And so I think because I have someone who is solid in who he is in Christ and knows who he is as a man of God and knows his own calling and understands that my calling, yes, it's with him, but it just might be that God has a call on my life and the life of our children who happen to be girls as well. So he's a girl dad, surrounded by us, and so he had to be. I heard my daughter, who's an attorney, thank him for being a non-chauvinist dad that treated her mother well, so she knows how to be treated by somebody. So it has not always been wonderful, Dr. Lon. I'm telling you, I'm sure that we both wanted to drop each other off at the bus station a few times, but in the blessing of God.
That's encouraging.
I don't know. It's hysterical. I mean, if you don't have a sense of humor, you will not last. I'm telling you. But I think that just being able to again meet at the foot of the cross. God gave you gifts. He gave me gifts. I need to be in a place where I can exercise those. And I just never remember him saying no. And him saying, let's pray about this. How's God led you? How's he open? If he opens the doors, he'll walk through them.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about him. We used to tease each other when we were a little younger and a little more vibrant that, okay, this weekend I have to speak at so-and-so. You'll be my eye candy.
Okay.
And next weekend you're preaching here. I'll sing and be your eye candy.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a partnership, just understanding that the calling is for us as a couple, but as individuals as well. And I think he treated my daughters, I don't know what it would have been like to have sons, but equally with understanding that they had the same opportunities. And look at your mom. So I think it's been that. I think as we get old, we still battle royally. We still have heated disagreements around. I mean, what is this interpretation of the word of God? Usually it's fun. It's really fun because he's not scared of me and I'm not scared of him. And so we have a great time together in all of our fullness. And whatever we do, we love hard, we play hard, we fight hard, we develop together hard, and we're each other's biggest cheerleaders. So and you just do, and then when we there is trouble, there's sometimes you need to talk to somebody who knows more than you, and so we try to be that for younger couples. Same thing. I've said the same. Looked the men in the eye and said, don't hurt her. Let's figure out how to make this work, and I mean that emotionally hurt. And sometimes in some cases, who knows? But I tried to. What I've learned these years, I've been willing to pour into other people. So.
Well, still on the marriage, did you go into like phases, like some people say phases of marriage? Like there's this one I read called the 7 rings of marriage. So say you start with engagement ring, then you move to the wedding ring, that's on the wedding day. Then you move to the suffering. Sorry, discovering, first of all. Discovering.
Dr. I think I was so naive, both of us, that we hit the ground running. Okay. He knew before I met. I was headed to the mission field. I was going to finish my degree in social work and head to Africa and do some, work there, because I always had an interest through a missionary that always came to our church. And he knew God had called him to full-time work. Now, totally different areas. But we figured for 2 African-American people who could have just gone into the workplace and made a bunch of money, and lived well and sent our kids to the Ivy League schools and what have you, the best schools, that we could have done that. But we knew that there was a call in our lives. And so I think we stepped out in faith, no money, no nothing. Been married 8 months, got commended into what they call full-time work. We decided that Inglewood would go back to where I came from, because our church was there, and we would be the youth directors. And he coached basketball, we coached volleyball together, and we played in a mural sport. We didn't know what we were doing, Dr. Lyon, but we had fun.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think in our babies, I was pregnant spiking balls on, Wayne Gordon. We played volleyball against him. I mean, we're young people together in this city, and so just having a good time and bringing our babies with us. And so, I don't know if I answered your question, but I really feel that we just didn't know enough to be afraid. It was not plotted and planned, and we prayed and we went as we prayed. So,
where did you meet him?
I met him. My husband got saved actually in prison in Japan through a missionary.
Wow!
And I know.
This started working as a prison ministry, like a minister, right?
When he was asked to go to the jail, nobody knew he had been saved in prison. Wow. He just showed up. Moody had a rival in the Chicago area called Emmaus Bible College, and that's where he went. Okay. And so he landed at our church 3 days after he was back in the United States, and then had gone to a retreat, and somebody said, come out to Emmaus and see if you can get in. He was already programmed to go to Moody, but he had to wait a semester because of his background. Yeah. But Emmaus took him right away. So he went there. And the first day on campus, somebody says, we're going to jail tonight. You want to go with us? They had no idea.
Yeah.
This man's background. He was like, they're probably not going to let me. He was terrified. Yeah. And then that night, for some reason, the chaplain in charge said, never saw too many black guys back then coming, his age coming. And he says, so you're coming to jail? He says, yeah, give your testimony. So needless to say, when he shared, guys were standing up to trust Christ. And he said, well, sit down, because I don't think you guys know what I'm saying to you. And they all stood up again. Wow. And then he began to use it as his PCM, Practical Christian Ministry.
Practical Christian Ministry, yeah.
Yeah, for 3 years while he was in Bible college, and then was asked to become a full-time chaplain. And then went through the ranks at Cook County, went through the training that all the guards go through, and the firing range, all that, and spent 25 years, if you count school, of his life.
That's awesome.
So we met because this missionary sent him to our church.
Okay.
He said, I think this is an integrated church in Inglewood. You need to go there. And he says that I saw him from the back of the church. And you have to understand, back those days, the qualifications for what was handsome had to do with the big afro and great clothes. And so I noticed.
He had a big afro.
I know. So I noticed from the back of the church that was an afro I hadn't seen before. I hadn't seen his face, but he says I got up to do a scripture memory verse in front, and I think we both looked at each other at the same time. And he tells people, "Lord is my shepherd; I see what I want," or something like that. and then it was immediate attraction, but then there was time to develop that relationship. And
So for you, it was the afro, right?
well, I mean, I tell him that. What really attracted me was his commitment to the Lord and his decision to spend the rest of his life serving him.
Yeah.
And that was rare in those days, so.
Wow, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And 43 years later, we don't
have afros anymore.
But still going on.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. So I wanted to talk about your teaching, the aspect of the educational aspect of your life, like educating, going into Trinity, teaching sometimes in Moody and all that. So can you tell us about that and what drove you into that?
Yeah. I actually was running our community development corporation from the church, and I got a call. Steve got a call from a man from Trinity who was a dean and said, we've been thinking about someone to fill this role. We wonder if your wife would be interested. And at the time, the role was it was a director of, it turned into me developing a learning lab. It turned into me developing a foreign student ministry there. It turned into a lot of things. It was supposed to be one simple job, but it was about 5 jobs in one. And when I got there, I was just fascinated because I didn't know this part of academia existed. And so after being there at least 2 or 3 years, I started my master's degree. And I finished that in 2 years. And then later, I began to teach first-year development for freshman students coming in, and occasionally would come to classes and talk about racism and social work and all the isms that our society to mostly non-Black students. And I think
was that Trinity?
Yeah, that was a Trinity. And this is Trinity in Palos Heights. There's 2 Trinities. There's one.
Oh, okay. I know the one in Heights too. Yeah,
the one in Palos Heights. So that's where I went, and I began to realize, I probably know more than I thought I did, and this couldn't be that hard. And I was just encouraged by my colleagues to continue my education, and then I, started a doctorate. And at that time, when I was working on the doctorate, I left Trinity and went to One Vision because I wanted to spread my wings a little more.
Yeah.
And then, but I always remained a Trinity person. I was on the board for 2 terms and served, and it developed the African American Student Ministries and all those things while I was there. So it was great, and it prepared me for what I'm doing now. And then as I started moving towards my graduate working at Christ Church, coming out of that, I began to look at African Americans that worked at predominantly white Christian ministries and realized how many of us had suffered trauma. The same trauma you can experience when you're integrating a school or you're being beat up and bullied. Sometimes the evangelical world can be very harsh, as we've seen, in the last 4 years of government here. It can do damage.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes for people of color, the opportunity to investigate what's happened to you doesn't happen. You work there as long as you can. You leave hurt, damaged. Nobody helps you to figure. In the exit interview, you can't really tell them what happened. Yeah. And so we end up with PTSD. From Christian ministry.
I imagine.
And you're talking to somebody who knows firsthand about that. But the Lord got me through. But I began to ask, what's happening with people? And so I began to look into seminary life, into people at Trinity in Deerfield, Trinity here, Trinity, other Christian places, and they all had the same story. This happened to me and I never told anybody, or this thing, just a way that people go into this Christian world thinking that things are equal, and here we can actually do some stuff together, but you still suffer the same things that the world does. And I think the processing of that and the ability to be able to work through what has happened to me, just as if you would counseling, just as if you would any other way. What just happened here?
Yeah.
And I began to take an interest in what's called spiritual direction,
Okay.
spiritual formation, and that's what I teach now at Northern. And I'm particularly asked to be with minority students. I was out in the suburbs working, so I would just teach the students that needed to graduate. But then I took an interest and noticed who was damaged the most. And it was both, but particularly our people. And because the access to counseling and all that is with counselors that look like us were a little different, I began to use those classes as a way of helping students get to know who they were. We did a lot of psychological testing. We did a lot of enneagrams and all those things to help students. But I began to realize that there has to be somebody that helps you process step to step, ministry to ministry, job to job, pain to pain, marriage to marriage, whatever. What just happened to me?
Yeah.
And I think spiritual formation does that in a way that helps you to be more attuned to God, to hear Him, and see Him. And so I have taken an interest in that, and I'm presently working to get certified in that. But that's what I think God has called me to at this stage in my life. Just being able to listen to God, to ask the right questions. It's mostly asking questions.
Yeah.
So when that happened to you, when someone told you you didn't qualify for that, what did that do to your psyche? How did that affect you? I was blessed to be able to have people that just did that naturally, and I thought they were nosy, but they were just really looking out for me. And there's a price to be paid if people don't have a chance to process. Your time in ministry becomes less, and you limit the time you go somewhere. If I'm going to be treated like this, I might as well be treated and make some money.
Leave
the ministry if this is what it's going to do to me. So, Dr. Line, that's where I feel that probably a lot of the rest of my life, and I hope I got some good years left, will be spent helping us examine and look inward and attune to God and be healed, real healing.
Yeah,
because we bring that stuff with us wherever we go.
Yeah. So that question, what just happened to me? What were some of the things you found out that happened to people, like in processing it with people? Some causes of that, burnout, just.
Well, first of all, the first thing you find out, even in the secular world, is that the pay is different. You're so glad to be a part of the ministry that you don't really think to negotiate
very well.
Very well, because you just assume it's a Christian ministry, so they don't have a lot. They can't do for me. And then all of that affects your livelihood and your ability to live in a way. And your relationship with your significant other and your children and the opportunities that are set before them. So a lot of times when people are going, not just in secular jobs, but into Christian ministries, they'll call me first and go, okay, you've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, everything else. Tell me how to navigate this, because it can be. And so I think I'm helpful in that regard, because I've worked for some of the major Christian ministries and had very good experiences. They aren't all without trial. That's just life, you know. You have to confront. How do I do confrontation and not be considered the angry Black woman or the angry Black man or the scary person? And I've had to do that with not just Black people, but people in general. But no one stops to say to you, you're being treated less, because you don't know it's happening to you until you bounce it off somebody. So this is what happened in that meeting. There's an extra amount of mansplaining that goes on for me as a woman if I'm in a Christian setting, because if I'm treated lesser than, if I'm thought of as less than, then it messes with the psyche. African American men, it's the same thing. They or what we do to each other in our own cultures. It's not just the outside cultures, but I came here thinking that you were going to give me the freedom to do this work.
But no.
but I had no intention of letting go of this.
Yeah.
I'm going to strangle it and you with it.
Wow.
How do I navigate those waters? How do I navigate those waters and leave an organization whole?
Yeah.
Or decide I'm going to stay and be whole in the process.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure we're going to get some questions on that. So for the audience, we're soon going to be moving into some question and answers. We have the opportunity for you to ask Dr. Thompson questions on what she has been sharing so far. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you about raising children, doing ministry, what you've been doing, and then raising your kids. I mean, you have grown kids now, and probably grandkids, right?
Not yet. I'm waiting.
Oh, you're waiting for the grandkids. Okay.
Just had a marriage. I'm trying not to, chomp at the bit. But
but what advice will you give to people like us and other people who are doing ministry, also raising kids and all that, from your experience?
If this helps, and I know we think we're doing this, but we included our children, and we made major decisions. We were able to sit them down and say, "Here's what's happening here. We're going through a rough time with ministry stuff, and we need you to be whole. What would help you?" We took them with us. They were our first employees at the not-for-profits. I paid them. I literally paid them because I wanted them to understand their worth and their value as they contributed, even to Christian ministry. Yes, you can volunteer. Yes, you can give your life to it, but there's a certain part of that where the workman is worthy of his hire, right?
Yes.
So they were my first computer analysts, and then we to help them develop. We helped them start little businesses. It was the first female-run lawn service in the neighborhood.
Okay. Wow.
We were totaling down the street at 6 and 12 with lawnmowers and all this, and they were painting fences and garages and doing so we not only and we made sure that in Chicago that we got them in good schools. And I think we couldn't afford to pay for good schools, but I had lots of friends who were teachers, and at 3 and 4, they were teaching me how to teach them to read so that they could qualify for those things. So they will tell you that they never felt neglected.
Very good.
It doesn't always happen with ministry kids.
It doesn't always, yeah.
And they always felt that we had the best interest. They always knew they had advocates in us. And we were not perfect parents. I'm sure we're damaged. So just the fact that we live in a damaged world, things happen. But I think that we did not put the ministry before them. They were pastors' kids, so I didn't let people mess with them at church.
Yeah.
or have any higher expectations they did of their own children.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's just being aware of what could happen and not always protecting them from things, but helping them walk through
those things.
And I think they're pretty whole people. One's in California, is an attorney, but works and teaches at Loyola Marymount too. And then one is here that just got married and is working for a corporation and will soon hopefully move into the corporate sphere of that. Loving the Lord, attending churches, singing in choirs, teaching Bible studies. For a while, they escaped us. We wondered for a minute. We were asking Jesus, come on now. You're scaring us a little bit, making some choices that we wouldn't necessarily want for them. But even for those choices, the door was open to have a conversation about them.
Awesome. So what's your view on private, public school?
We send our kids to public school because I told you that our intention was that we stay in the city. But it wasn't. Mommy was part of the parent council. Mommy was bringing the cupcakes. Mommy was the field trip lady. This home was the home for the latchkey kids. That's the school they went to now does child evangelism fellowship in the building, if you can believe it.
That's
But
awesome.
the foundation was laid because of the Christian parents who decided they're not going to tell us what to do. We're going to tell them what to do.
Yes,
And
yes.
so when it came to teaching sex education, we demanded no, yes, no, yes. This is what we're teaching. This, if you're going to teach alternative lifestyles, and we need to talk about. And it's so funny, Dr. Lon. We would have Christmas and Easter programs. Santa Claus would be here, and the cross, the manger was right here. At Easter, the Easter bunny would be here, and the cross was right here.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a good one.
So you have to, as a parent, advocate. You have to be
Gotta be involved.
You know, and not poo-poo everything, but say, well, it's a both and, guys. I mean, most of us grew up in church. Teachers were, some of them were choir directors and what have you. Church, come on, now we owe it to Jesus to represent. And so we're gonna let the Easter bunny can hop in, but he's gonna hop in and sit at the foot of the cross with the other stuff. And baby Jesus is gonna be a little brown doll and some burlap bag. So it's involvement, I think, Dr. Lon, that helps them in turn learn how to advocate for other people. And both of them, I can say, are that they lead and they do it in a humble but powerful way. And it was because of what they saw, not just in us, but other Christian families that were at that school. So they'll tell you we ran the show all the way through high school graduation. And they sing Christian songs at the graduation. Jesus was in there.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I have a few more questions for you. Let me check our timing. I think we're good. But I still have some questions for you before I throw it to the audience. So I wanted to know if someone wanted to get into education, like what you do, teaching and all that, what would you advise them? How will you advise them to approach the kind of ministry that you do? Then later, I would like us to talk about Together Chicago and the trainings and all that going on. But can you just address that one first?
Yeah, I think sometimes we make it harder than it needs to be. But at some point, as you start asking people their spiritual gifts and you start watching them, even as young people, sometimes people don't know what that is, and you have to say to them, I see this in you. Why don't you pursue that? Or like people did for me. I'm a 16-year-old kid going the bus to school and reading Watchman Nee and C.S. Lewis and wait, I didn't know that was. I thought all teenage Christian kids read that.
That's good.
And so I'm watching.
I love Watchman Nee. I love C.S. Lewis.
I know.
I was still reading. So I was reading Watchman Nee 2 weeks ago. The Reading of the Spirit.
So you can imagine. I'm 16. I'm reading. But I'm going back to the elders, which they knew I would do, and say, okay, what does this mean? And so I think when you notice something in someone, and they may know they have a penchant of passion towards it, or a kid is able to negotiate. I have one child that can negotiate her way out of a paper bag, and that's the kid that's the lawyer.
Wow.
So you put people in some of what is natural, but also what God's supernatural spirit is doing to them. Notice that in yourself. And then ask someone and then say, well, what should I do? I got a sociology degree because it would allow me to go in any direction I wanted to go in, not because, and then I started in business and hated accounting. So why would I stay there? But I began to realize that I have an ability to advocate. I was a firstborn kid. I saw my mother advocating in school for me. I advocated for my siblings and for the kids in high school who were scared to speak up for themselves, And I began to realize I have a voice and that I was responsible. And this church leaders helped me realize I'm responsible for that voice and to use it to God's glory. And then to begin to just be curious about education. I mentioned to you that someone told me as a 20-something person that had an active intellect. Now, I didn't know if that was an insult or what, but because I'm nosy, I want to know. I wasn't sure, but I took that as it's okay to be curious. It's okay to try things. If you fail, It's okay to fail at something because that helps you know what you're not
Exactly.
wanting to do. And so I just took the natural passions of being able to advocate on behalf of other people and just went to school. And I could not go. I got accepted at a school in California. We couldn't afford the airplane ticket. I probably never would have come back, I suppose, if I'd have gone there. But the Lord fixed it where I got all the money I needed to go to school here, and I did that. And so that some things were what would look like circumstance, but they were obviously God providing. And I wasn't afraid to ask for the money. An organization wants me to do something now. I said, well, will you pay for my training? All they can say is no, right?
Yeah.
You know? And so I think to follow your natural passions, but to not be afraid to educate yourself. And there are always certification programs if you can't afford school. But there's also, I went to tutoring for some things. I just didn't have it all together. And I wasn't ashamed to do that and to go get help and to have people push and help me through. So continue to be curious, continue to want to educate yourself. And to me, the scriptures, that says, I know the plans I have for your success and not your failure.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't know if that helps you.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. You said you've been to Africa.
Twice to Rwanda and to Uganda.
Okay.
And the first time was, of course, about 10 years after the genocide, and shot a movie with some people. And then the second time, and then a guest of, I guess, the first lady in Uganda, Mrs. Museveni. And the second time I took students.
Okay. To Rwanda?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we did service.
Like
Kigali, but we were out in the countrysides and we went to hospitals. I didn't know what I was doing, Dr. Lyon, but the Lord was with me. Found a good place to stay. Had about 12 students with me. It changed their lives.
Yeah, I know it does. Did you visit the Genocide Museum there in Kigali? Yeah. The
first time they were just opening it up, and so they hadn't even dug it out of the ground. So we saw, the raw remains of what they were going to do, the plans, and got to walk down into some of the places. Some places were changing my life forever. They were riveting to my soul.
Yeah.
But it's man's inhumanity to man, which is
I've been there. I mean, I used to go to Rwanda like every year for several years, and I've taken my son there, my first son there too. That museum was a transforming experience for him. Just reading through everything, seeing those things, just can't remain the same.
Yeah, and then just 2 years ago, I was in South Africa with Biblica, with an organization. And I got the chance to teach some students while I was there.
Okay. So what do you just before we get together Chicago now after Africa, what's the feeling for you and being there? What was your observation?
Well, now I have to tell you this. The first trip we went to was on the board of all women and very wealthy women, and then a few of us, about 4 of us, were African American women. We had a totally different experience. And then the women in Rwanda noticed we were having a totally different experience. But when we got there, it was so moving for us that we actually picked up the dirt. And we went. It was so new after the genocide, Dr. Lyon, that the bullet holes were still in the airport. And so it was we took the dirt and put it in our suitcases, and we got pieces of them. We were home as far as.
Yes, motherland. Yeah.
We had a totally different experience than our white colleagues. We had a ball. We noticed the food. We noticed the similarities. They would walk to us and say, "You are built like a Nigerian."
Yeah.
We didn't know if people were trying to, mess with us, or we were really, but we felt at home. And we just had my oldest daughter was with me, and she spent a day with in the Rwandan government, and she came out of that meeting thinking, if women can rebuild a country, I can be a lawyer.
Yes, wow. I've heard about that. I've seen some people that we've taken there, and also just from people that when you go there, especially African Americans, there's just something. I sent my son. My son was born here. My first son is going to be 17 next month. Born here, raised here, but I sent him for 1 year to Nigeria for schooling, and he came back with a different view, like transformed. So Yeah, I always try to ask, what is it that changes? Like, what's the cause of the change? Because we don't appreciate it because we're from there.
Yeah. Well, you see yourself everywhere, first of all, and you see from the very top of leadership. Mrs. Museveni took her also for 2 days and said, "Can I keep her? I want her to marry my son." I was like, "Nope." But the influence, what I watched was how it changed her.
Yeah.
To this day, it never has been the same for her. And my youngest daughter benefited from her sister having gone through that, and we've yet to get her there yet. But so much so that it has changed the trajectory of her life and mine too. Because she said, if women can lead a country.
Yeah, then I can't be a lawyer. I
I come here and they're telling me at home this is hard. These women
can do it. Yes.
I can do this. And they wrote her admission letters to law school.
Wow, awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah. My son said, wow, seeing everyone, one of the things he first saw was like he saw all these stores and mini stores by the road and all that. Like everybody was like had some kind of entrepreneurial spirit there. So I asked him, I was like, what did you notice? He said, one of the things I've learned is that you can actually do anything you want to do. Nothing can really stop. It's a transforming experience.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. So let's talk about Together Chicago right now. How did you get involved with Together Chicago?
I sometimes don't know, but I think I remember Dr. Feuder had just penned his book on community mapping.
Yeah.
And I was the head of at World Vision at the time. And they were trying to do an outreach for first time out of the stable, so to speak. And they were trying to do a citywide prayer event. So World Vision was able to partner with Dr. Feuder and the folks at Moody. So we had Moody staff. I come up to Moody with my manager, and we sat down and planned what is it that we can do to do an outreach to help him do that. And so we began to be friends after that. And as soon as that happened, I don't know, I wrote the foreword to his book, and and what we call me and a few of us as the OGs. We're the original gangsters of Chicagoland. It was pre-Chicago then, and we believed radically that prayer is what changes things, and that could happen in our city and stop some of the violence. So I don't even remember, Dr. Lyon, when that was, but it was way back as we began. And then since that time, we have seen God just open doors miraculously and use Dr. Feuder's earnest love for the city. Yeah. He's a country boy, if you ask him, but his earnest love for the city to bring folks together in prayer. And we had to move it from pre-Chicago to Chicagoland, and there are chapters in other cities similar to, the result of this. So Together Chicago is another story, and it is a passion of mine because it takes care of, it is a ministry that's separate from Chicago United Prayer, who adopted them, that look at a fivefold economic. It's a Christian organization, but it's for the lifting up of economics, education, the legal system, prayer, and I can't remember the last, and the public schools. So there are men that run each of those sections of Together Chicago, and I serve on their board of directors with some very wonderful leaders from the suburbs in Chicago.
Pastor Mike was on last week.
Was he? Michael Allen? Yeah. So, I tease him all the time. I'm your boss, right? But just really a man dedicated to the city as well.
Awesome. So what do you see, like your right now at this stage in life, your vision for the city, for the body, for the kingdom?
I think as you look and you study church history, Dr. Lon, where things happen in cycles, doesn't it seem like that? There's great renewals. There's the ages of enlightenment. There's all kinds of things that happen in culture. And I think at no time like the present, we are called to be salt and light. We know it intellectually. We know it when it comes to preaching the gospel. But my vision, and I'm seeing this in Together Chicago may be one example of that, where we are affecting every point in society.
Yeah.
That we don't just, the church is not the only pulpit we have.
Yeah.
The
but
church
everywhere.
Every, to me, when it said inherit the earth, Jesus meant that.
Yeah.
You know, in areas of business.
Yes.
In areas of medical innovation, in politics, and I learned, you know, very young in politics that there's honor amongst thieves. Why can't there be honor amongst Christians? You know, why can't we do the same things and do them to the glory of God? And so I see all the movements that are happening now, because we've gone through 4 years with some strange stuff in terms of where our country is, and I think that Christians could be some of the most disrespected people.
Yeah.
And we have an opportunity to bring glory and honor back.
Yes.
To God's great name and to who we say we are as believers. And that's going to be tough. But we're equipped to do that. I mean, we've given all things for godliness, right? And for righteousness.
Yes.
And I think we have to just walk into and live into that fact and not be afraid, you know.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to throw this open right now. We have a section that we call questions, comments for those who are watching. I'll bring Pastor Olu up to join us. So, audience, we can see your questions. Just throw it wherever you're watching from. Throw it there in the chat, and I will ask Dr. Felicia. While we're monitoring for those questions, Pastor Olu, what's your impression?
Man, it's been very empowering. It's been very encouraging. Dr. Thompson, thank you for sharing your faith, your insight, your knowledge. I mean, when you're talking about trauma, I was like, man, this is real. And as Christians, we don't think about the way you broke it down, talking about, each phases, how do you process what you go through as a pastor, as a husband, as a wife, as a children. Thank you for doing that. But my question for you is that for you as a person personally, I know that is what you said, that is what you're going to do for the rest of your life, your new phase of life. So you do to encourage, how can you bring this new vision? How can you proclaim it to the church? How can you make it simple that everybody too can learn this thing and make it in their home and in their churches and all over the city?
Well, a definition for what spiritual formation is, Pastor Olu and Dr. Lon, is a facilitation of being attuned to God's voice. That's all that is. Attunement. You want to be so in touch with what God is saying to you and the leading of the Holy Spirit that you listen for His voice. Now, Pastor Olu, you probably didn't know I could talk this much because you never ever hear me do that. But what formation teaches you is to listen, to stop. What is God saying through this person? God, help me hear them. Everybody wants to be understood, right? And so what I'm pushing, I guess, for lack of a better word, or excited about with this formation piece is the ability to hear God, to be still, to listen, to ask myself questions, to ask questions of others. What is God saying to you? What does that scripture mean now that you've been through what you've been through? What have you learned from this experience that you've had? and even teach people to pray differently. Sometimes there's an old monastic practice called Lectio Divina, where you pray, you read a passage of scripture looking for different things, different times. So the first time it'd be just to read it, the second time for God to show you something, and then the third time, what is it? What am I supposed to do with this? You know? And so I think that this requires slowing down a little bit. And I'm moving fast. My brain moves all the time, but once I have learned to just bring my thoughts into submission and the captivity to the Word of God, I hear Him differently.
Yeah.
You know, I serve Him differently. I leave room for Him to make the adjustments that He makes in my life. And I think that sometimes in the fast-paced world that we're in, always trying to achieve, prove something, get something, you miss out on being close to God in a way that I think, for me, I had never been able to achieve before I intentionally began to listen for His voice.
Thank you. I have a question here. It says, from your story, you must have been sometimes the lone African-American lady in the places where you worked. What's your advice for a young African-American lady trying to make her way through a male-dominated world?
Know who you are in Jesus. and I think this person probably knows that. And then and that understanding, I don't have to, because I am a child of God, prove anything to anybody. I just have to be good at whatever it is I do. And that would be for anybody, any Christian who names the name of Christ. You want to show Him proud. You want to do your Father proud. So I think if you just keep operating, keep in the Word of God, keep in fellowship with other people, other women who are doing. I mentor a lot of younger women on how to walk this race, and how not to be pressured by unrealistic expectations, but that the same expectations you have for you have for me. And I think that if we just allow God to speak to us and guide us, and not be so quick, oftentimes, to be hurt, find fault, be shut up and shut down, but really think about my responses, and then make sure that when I do speak is with power, and that it means something. So,
thank you. I have another question here. So, Dr. Felicia, sometimes I don't want to show it because I'm trying to protect their names, but I know this person, so I'm sure she wouldn't mind. He said, Dr. Felicia, congratulations on 43 years to you and your hobby. What advice do you have for those in marriage ministry to encourage couples for strong, godly marriages? Those in marriage ministry, yeah.
Okay, if you can, and I know this sounds trite. I don't want to make it sound too trite, but if you can teach people to not take themselves so seriously, and to understand in a marriage ministry that you're all kind of novices at this thing, and that we've been taught as women to feel that the men, they're strong, they can take it, that they're just as sensitive as we are, and that what I say and how I say it is important, and and forgiveness. I think if you can teach anything, forgiveness, because it's a daily forgiving. It's a daily thing, and to forgive, and you don't forget, but learn from what you mistakes that you've made. But forgiveness is a big part of being able to stay together for a long time.
Okay, one quick question. Pastor Lou, do you have a question? Shall I read?
Yeah. Ask the question. I will ask.
Yeah. So it says, how do you choose the women that you mentor?
They usually find me. Somebody a few times has told them, you really should talk to what you're going through. I know somebody that's been through that. You really should talk to them. Or there are oftentimes women that don't have the support of other women. It sometimes can be difficult amongst us to not be in competition and not be in, but the one thing I can say, I've always been good with myself, and I've never needed to compete with other folks. And I think to find someone who's able to be a spiritual mother, a spiritual sister in the Lord. Sometimes we have women that have struggled to make it themselves, and they don't have that family support in their homes from their own mothers. I remember once getting up there, and somebody in my family told me, "You think you're better than us?" And I was like, "You just don't know, honey." And just someone that supports you, that holds your arms up, kind of like the pastor.
Yeah.
Someone that's walking around the buildings for you and praying for you and what have you. So generally, they find me, and it's been fun. I've just had some great relationships with younger women.
Thank you, Pastor. Please hold on. So a question here. You mentioned that your husband has been very supportive of you in your journey. What advice will you give to a person, a woman, whose husband is not that supportive?
I think first you got to figure out why. I think my husband would not be upset with me for saying this. There have been times when he has told me, "I'm just really jealous. This stuff is happening for you, and it's not happening for me the same way it is." And I said, "Well, yeah, I was down there scrubbing floors while you were out there doing stuff too." And so it's honesty, I think, in the fact that he could say that to me. Because I noticed he, sometimes he would treat me differently. And I would say, "Please honestly tell me what you're feeling." And he said, "Right now, I'm just mad. Seems like my stuff is going this way, your stuff is going this way, and then I'm able to, do what wives do. And let him know that his manhood is not in what he does,
He's safe.
Pardon me. You know how we have to work on you guys.
Yes, I know.
and at the same time, be able to be very honest and be myself with him too, because there's sometimes I've had to say, I feel like God called me to do this, and He's going to make room for me to do it, whether you do it or not, but never at a point where we've been so disrespectful to one another. But men have emotions just like we do. They feel jealousy, they feel intimidation, they feel anger, they feel, and sometimes it appears to be easier for them. So I think to be able to have honest conversations, and if not, have another conversation with a couple who's gone through that, so that you're not in that room by yourself with it. So.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We'll take one last question. Pastor Olu, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask you, I know that we have a training coming up on Saturday, which is Block of Peace. Can you just talk about it? What people expect when they come on Saturday?
Well, I don't know, Pastor Olu, if you're going to put up the place where they can join us, but Building Blocks of Peace came as an addendum to the prayer that we did. We thought we keep having these great prayer meetings. What do we do to make sure that communities get changed and we see the results of our prayers? And so this is a collaboration of community faith-based leaders with the Chicago Police Department, with other organizations that decide that the church is needed to help them do their job. And we need to have open communication with the powers that be over us, and be involved with those as well. So this will be a training from people who are already working in their communities, most of whom are pastors or not-for-profit leaders. They will get on and share their experiences. There will be some probably officers from police department speaking, maybe someone from the mayor's office, maybe some people who have some resources that they can share with you about how to get things started in your church and community in partnership with one another. So it goes beyond prayer, which you can never really go beyond that. But along with prayer, we're attempting to train community leaders on how to be better community leaders, or more effective. And that'll take place on this Saturday. And I see our brothers, someone's put this up for us. and it's free of charge. You go and you join. You're able to join by district. If you want to know what's going on in your particular district, there will be a time where there are breakout sessions, and you can learn and get involved and connect with folks who want to see their communities change and be less violent.
Thank you. Wow. This has been
Amazing.
amazing. We've spent 1 hour, 30 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun, right? Yeah, but it's been rich. It's been really, really rich. I'm so sure that our audience, they got their bang for, for the time. Yeah. So thank you so much for your openness, just, being free and sharing from your experience, your life. I learned so much myself, and I'm sure our audience also, they've learned a lot, been inspired. So we really appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time. And thank you again for all the things you are doing in the city. We appreciate you. Thank you for being a forerunner in the city for us. So,
well, if you ever need me, just call. You know how to find me.
Yes, we'll do. We'll do. So, Pastor Olu, please take us away as we wrap up Light 360 for this week.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We just want to appreciate everybody joining us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. We want to appreciate you. And we just want to, I want to tell you that make sure, please share this video on your social media platform so that we can reach more people and they can learn from what Dr. Thompson has shared with us today. And so we're going to wrap up this week. We don't have anything tomorrow because tomorrow is Good Friday. But join us next week, Wednesday at 5 p.m., Thursday at 5 p.m., and Friday at 5 p.m. And it's going to be a very interesting time next week. So have a wonderful time, have a wonderful weekend, and happy celebration weekend. And thank you, Dr. Thompson, for coming, for sharing with us. And thank you, Dr. Ladd, for hosting this show. Everyone, bye, and see you.
Yes. We'll see you next week.